The challenge that silenced Mike Tyson. The gym smelled of sweat, leather, and adrenaline. The walls echoed with the sound of punches against punching bags, the creaking of jump ropes, and the constant murmur of men testing their limits. Among them, Mike Tyson, then a young fighter on the rise, already carried the reputation of a relentless prodigy on his shoulders. But that day, in a nearly forgotten corner of the Los Angeles training facility, something unexpected was about to happen. Bruce Lee, thin as a razor but with a presence that seemed to bend the space around him, adjusted the straps on his shoes as Tyson approached. The boxer, with his defiant smile and the glow of someone who had never known defeat, carried a plank of plywood under his arm. "Hey, Lee. They say you're fast. How about you break this one?" Tyson lifted the board, slamming it against his palm with a sharp crack. "But it has to be first rate. No messing around." Bruce's eyes narrowed, not out of irritation, but out of curiosity. He knew the game. Tyson wasn't just testing his skill, he was measuring his pride. And Bruce Lee never turned down a challenge. "Of course," he said, without hesitation. He picked up the tablet, examining it with the precision of a watchmaker. "But you hold on. I don't want it to fly up and hit someone." Tyson laughed, finding it funny. "Are you afraid of hurting the wood, man?" Bruce didn't respond. Instead, he positioned the board vertically, holding it with one hand while the other rested at his side, relaxed. The gym, realizing what was coming, fell silent. Even the older coaches stopped to watch. Then, it happened. A movement so fast it seemed like an illusion. Bruce's foot rose in a perfect arc, snap, and the board split in half with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. The two halves fell to the ground, still shaking. The impact was so clean, so precise, that Tyson didn't even feel the blow. He just stood there, mouth open, eyes wide as if he had just witnessed a magic trick. Seconds passed. The silence in the gym was absolute. Tyson shook his head slowly, as if waking up from a dream. "Holy shit." The voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. He looked at the plank halves on the floor, then at Bruce, who was now adjusting the straps of his other shoe as calmly as before. "How the hell did you do that?" Bruce shrugged, as if the answer was obvious. "It wasn't the strength. It was the speed. And the intention." He turned to Tyson, his dark eyes shining with something that went beyond confidence. It was the certainty of someone who knew exactly what he was capable of. Wood doesn't break on its own. You have to want it to break. Tyson didn't say anything else. For a few moments, the fighter who never backed down, who crushed opponents with devastating punches, was speechless. There, faced with a man who weighed half his size, he understood a simple truth: the martial art was not just about muscles. It was about mind. About control. About the ability to make the impossible seem easy. And that day, Bruce Lee didn't just break a board. He broke the arrogance of a champion. The Dragon's Challenge. The gym was silent. Even the air seemed denser, as if space itself was holding its breath. Tyson, used to being the center of attention, felt the weight of that moment on his shoulders. It wasn't just a demonstration. It was a lesson, and lessons, he knew, often hurt more than punches. Bruce walked away, his steps light as if he were floating on the mat. He stopped in front of a pile of thicker boards, stacked in a corner, and studied them with the same attention with which a surgeon examines a scalpel. No rush. No hesitation. Just the calm of someone who already knew the result. "You said wood doesn't break on its own," Tyson murmured, his voice hoarse, as if the words had to tear through his throat to get out. "Then show me what else you can break." Bruce didn't turn around. He just smiled, a quick flash of white teeth against tan skin. "It's not about what I can break, Tyson. It's about what you can understand." Before the fighter could respond, Bruce spun around, his body moving in a blur. The first blow struck the pile of boards, not with brute force, but with surgical precision, the impact echoing like a gunshot. The wood didn't split. It clicked. A dry, clean sound, like bones breaking under the right pressure. One board flew, then another, and another, until only splinters and dust remained on the floor. Tyson felt his jaw tighten. It wasn't anger. It was something worse, envy. Not from Bruce's ability, but from the clarity with which he saw the world. For Tyson, the fight had always been a question of domination, who could hit the hardest, who could take the most pain. But there, in front of this small, lethal man, he realized that true strength lay not in his fists, but in the mind that guided them. "How long have you been training?" Tyson asked, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. Bruce grabbed a towel, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Since I could walk. But it's not time that matters. It's what you do with it." He threw the towel aside and walked over, stopping less than a meter away from Tyson. "You're fast. Strong. But you fight like you're always racing against yourself." "Why?" Tyson laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Because that's how you win." "No," Bruce shook his head. "That's how you destroy yourself before you even get to the ring." The fighter felt his blood boil. It wasn't a provocation. It was a truth he had always known, but never wanted to face. "And what do you suggest, then? That I fight like you? With flourish and philosophy?" Bruce wasn't offended. He just extended his hand, his fingers slightly curved, as if he was holding something invisible. "I suggest you fight like you do. But first, you need to figure out who you are when you're not breaking bones." Tyson looked at the outstretched hand. It wasn't a challenge. It was an invitation. And for the first time in years, he hesitated. The warrior's way. The following days were an ordeal. Bruce didn't treat him like a student, but like a mirror. Tyson's every move was analyzed, not to be corrected, but to be understood. "Why do you back off after the jab?" Bruce asked, blocking a punch with irritating ease. "Because that's how I was taught," Tyson replied, panting. "And who taught you to think?" replied Bruce, dodging another blow with a sidestep. At first, Tyson resisted. He broke more boards, this time, with furious punches, as if the wood were Bruce himself. But with each attempt, the lesson became clearer: uncontrolled force was just waste. He began to notice the patterns in his own movements, the vices that made him predictable. And, worse, he realized that, deep down, he had always known this. One night, after an exhausting workout, Tyson sat on the gym floor, his back against the wall, sweat running down his face. Bruce offered him a bottle of water. "You're getting better," she said, sitting down next to him. "Not enough," Tyson grumbled. "Enough for what?" Tyson didn't respond. It didn't need to. They both knew. He wanted to prove something, to the world, to himself. But Bruce wasn't interested in proof. The fight is not a test, Tyson. It's a dialogue. You talk with your fists, but you don't hear the answers. The fighter closed his eyes. He remembered every knockout, every hard-earned victory, every time he stepped into the ring feeling the weight of expectations. And for the first time, he asked himself, what do I really want? The last lesson. The day of departure arrived. Tyson entered the ring not like a hurricane, but like a contained storm. His opponent, a promising young man with a devastating left hook, faced him with the confidence of someone who already saw himself as champion. Tyson smiled. It was not a smile of scorn, but of recognition. The gong sounded. The first round was a dance. Tyson didn't attack. Observed. He blocked, dodged, counterattacked with precision, not fury. His opponent, confused, began to force blows, leaving openings. In the second round, Tyson landed a clean uppercut, not with all his strength, but with the exact amount needed to knock his opponent down. The audience exploded. But Tyson didn't celebrate. He just looked at his hands, as if they belonged to someone else. After the fight, Bruce was waiting for him backstage. "Congratulations," he said, without exaggerated enthusiasm. "It wasn't how I imagined it," Tyson admitted, taking off his gloves. "And how did you imagine?" "That I would feel something greater. A release." Bruce nodded. "Liberation isn't in victory, Tyson. It's in the moment you realize you no longer need to prove anything." Tyson looked at him, really looked, and understood. It wasn't about being the best. It was about being whole. Epilogue: The Dragon and the Bull. Years later, Tyson became a trainer. His students sought him out for his reputation, for his legend as an invincible fighter. But he greeted them with a simple question: do you want to win, or do you want to learn? Some gave up. Others stayed. And sometimes, when the gym was empty and the lights were low, Tyson would still practice the moves Bruce had taught him, not to break boards, but to remember that true strength doesn't make noise. And that, in the end, even a bull can learn to dance. The weight of legend. The gym smelled of old sweat and worn leather. Tyson observed the new group of students, young people with hungry eyes, lithe bodies, and that same arrogance that had once been his. One of them, a thin, shaggy-haired boy named Leo, crossed his arms and let out a defiant laugh. "I heard you never lost a fight." "That is true?" Tyson didn't respond right away. The question echoed like a punch in the air, filled with expectation. He remembered Bruce, that night on the roof, the words that only made sense years later. "No," he said finally. "I lost them all." Leo frowned, confused. The other students exchanged glances. Tyson continued. "I lost to fear. For anger. To the idea that it needed to be perfect." He pointed to the punching bag. "Victory is only what remains when you stop fighting yourself." Leo snorted but didn't retort. Tyson knew the boy didn't understand. Not yet. The challenge. Weeks later, Leo returned to the gym with a bruise on his face and wounded pride. He had been defeated in a clandestine fight, humiliated in front of an audience that expected from him the same invincibility that they attributed to Tyson. "I want to train," he said, his voice shaking with shame. "I want to be like you." Tyson stared at him. There was no longer anger in the boy's eyes, just a raw pain, the same one he himself had carried years before. "You don't want to be like me," he replied. "You want to be better." Leo didn't understand. Tyson didn't explain. The lesson. The training was brutal. Tyson didn't spare the boy from falls, from exhaustion, from moments when Leo wanted to give up. But unlike Bruce, Tyson offered no words of comfort. He just stood there, a silent specter, watching as the boy struggled against his own limits. Until, one night, Leo broke down. He was on the floor, his hands shaking, his chest heaving. Tyson walked over and crouched down beside him. "Why do you fight?" he asked. Leo hesitated. Because I want to be strong." "Strong for what?" The boy didn't know how to respond. Tyson stood up and held out his hand. "Tomorrow, you will tell me the answer." The next morning, Leo didn't show up. Tyson waited until noon, then went to the neighborhood where the boy lived. He found him sitting on the sidewalk, his knees hugging each other, his face swollen from crying. Beside him, an elderly woman held a damp cloth to a cut on her forehead. "My grandmother," said Leo, his voice breaking. "They came to collect a debt. I tried to stop them." Tyson looked at the woman. She smiled tiredly and shook her head. "He is stubborn, but has a good heart." Tyson crouched down in front of Leo. "Now you know why you fight." The dance. Years passed. Leo became a fighter, not invincible, but whole. Tyson, in turn, grew older. The joints hurt, the reflexes were no longer the same. But he was still there, in the gym, watching new students arrive with the same dreams, the same fears. One night, after everyone had left, he stood in front of the mirror. The reflection showed a man with gray hair, old scars, and eyes that had seen too much. He raised his hands, slowly, and began to perform the movements Bruce had taught him. He was no longer a bull. It was no longer a dragon. He was just a man, dancing with the weight of what he carried. And for once, that was enough. The last round. The gym was empty except for the echo of Leo's footsteps on the mat. He had returned earlier than agreed, but it was no coincidence. Something was pulling him back, as if the place was calling him before it was too late. Tyson was no longer there. The old master's body had been found that morning, curled up on the locker room floor, his hands still clenched in a guard position. The doctors said it was a quick, massive attack. But Leo knew it wasn't just his heart that had stopped. It was the dance. He knelt next to the punching bag, the same one Tyson used to train beginners. He ran his fingers over the worn surface, feeling the grooves left by years of punches. He remembered the first time the old man had told him to hit him there, with that hoarse voice that brooked no excuses. It's not strength that makes a fighter, boy. It's knowing when to back down. Leo closed his eyes. I could hear Tyson's labored breathing, the creaking of his joints, the muffled sound of the blows that never landed. The master was never one for easy victories. He had always demanded more, not out of cruelty, but because he knew that the real fight didn't happen in the ring. You taught me how to fall, Leo murmured, as if Tyson could still hear. But you didn't tell me how to get up without you. The silence in the gym was heavy. The trophies on the shelves, the yellowed photos of fighters that no longer existed, everything seemed to testify to emptiness. Leo stood up, took off his shirt and wrapped the bandages around his hands. It wasn't training. It was a farewell. He started slowly, repeating the movements that Tyson had corrected 1,000 times. The jab, the cross, the hook. Every blow was a memory. Sweat ran down his back, but he didn't stop. When his breathing became ragged, when his muscles burned, he forced himself to continue. Not out of pride. Out of respect. Then, in the middle of the movement, something changed. It was no longer Tyson who was watching him. It was himself, years ago, the scared boy who had walked into that gym for the first time, with bruised knuckles and fear in his eyes. Leo stopped, panting, and looked at the mirror. The reflection showed a man. Not the invincible fighter he dreamed of being, nor the failure he sometimes believed he was. Just a man, with scars, doubts and the stubbornness of someone who still believed in something. He dropped his hands. There would be no more training in that gym. Tyson had left him with one last lesson: the fight wasn't about winning. It was about not giving up, even when the world seemed determined to bring you down. Leo put on his shirt, turned off the lights and closed the door behind him. Outside, the city remained indifferent. Cars passed by, people rushed by, life went on. But something inside him had settled. He knew where to go. The path was long, but there was no rush. After all, dancing had never been about getting there quickly. It was about finding the right rhythm, even when the steps hurt. And Leo was finally ready to dance alone.